From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., Call on Congress. The program discussing national issues that affect Oklahoma. Your host, U.S. Representative Tom Cole.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Call on Congress. Today we're privileged to have as our special guest from Oklahoma's 2nd Congressional District, Congressman Dan Boren. After serving as one of the youngest state legislators in the Oklahoma House of Representatives, Dan was elected to Congress in 2004. He currently serves on the Intelligence Committee, the Armed Services Committee, and the House Resources Committee, an influential panel that provides Congress with oversight into Indian affairs and public land. Dan, it's great to have you. It seems funny to give you a formal welcome and introduction.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Because you've been such a wonderful friend long before Congress and obviously since then. And I always like to start with something a little bit personal. And you know, your dad's probably my most important constituent, so I'm on my best behavior here today. But I think people in Oklahoma ought to know just what a credit you are to our state and what an outstanding job you do representing us. And you were very easy to work with when you were in the minority and we were in the majority, and always put Oklahoma interests first. You were exactly the same when you were in the majority. And now that we're going back, into the majority, I'm sure the relationship will continue. And the great thing, we've seen turmoil and change all around us, but our delegation has really been remarkably cooperative and cohesive on the things that matter to Oklahoma.
That's right. We have worked together, and thank you for mentoring me in so many ways, working on the Armed Services Committee together, traveling to Iraq, visiting with our troops from Oklahoma, and traveling the state. I think it's been a great partnership. Our delegation, as you said, does work together, and we have some really special people both in the House and the Senate. Very happy to see, even though I'm a Democrat and we're losing the majority, I'm happy to see people like Frank Lucas becoming the chairman of the Agriculture Committee. That's good for the state. Your role in the Appropriations Committee, I think, is so vital. We've got John Sullivan, now very senior on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and then we have a new member in James Lankford, who I'm just getting to know and I really like as a bright new individual in our delegation.
Well, he's a terrific guy, and I think it actually will serve us all very well, honestly, to have a member in this new freshman class. It's a pretty historic class, not just that it's Republican, but you're talking over 90 new members, so it by itself is well over a fifth of the House, and they're going to change the place. You can't have that. I don't know how big the class was when you came in. When I came in, I think we were 53 or 54. So again, this is very much larger than anything we've seen around here in a long time.
Yeah, my class was actually pretty small on the Democratic side because 2004 was such a Republican year, President Bush's re-election. And then, 2 years later, we have this huge swing and Democrats take control. And it's kind of funny, I always joke about, groups that come from Oklahoma to Washington. And, when I was in the minority, people were stopping by my office last and always saying, my plane's got to leave here in just a minute. I've just got a few minutes to visit with you. And then when we get in the majority, a lot of people were, hey, Dan, I'd really want to visit with you. But it doesn't matter whether you're in the minority or the majority. I think if you work in a bipartisan fashion like you do, I think people, it doesn't matter who's in power, the pendulum swings, and it's to the benefit of the state that we have Republicans and Democrats, I think, because you never know.
Well, boy, the last few years have been the indication of that. I mean, I don't think, I know the Republicans felt very strongly in 2002, 2004 that they were going to have a long run. Clearly they didn't. I think the Democrats felt the same way. And when people tell me at home, gosh, people seem to come and stay forever, I said, well, I've got about 100 of my colleagues that have been defeated in the last 3 election cycles. So believe me, the American people, when they want to make a change, they're not hesitant about doing it.
And this was a change election, no doubt about it. People, as you know, in your district, in our districts, the large town hall meetings, the people that were engaged in politics that have never been involved before, people, writing letters, listening to the radio, getting involved. it was good for our democracy, I think. Even though my party ended up bearing the brunt of a lot of the losses, I still think it's important that people got involved and people feel like they made a difference.
Oh, I think so, and it's actually that'll kind of lead us into our first question. But I agree with you. I think it's actually very important that Congress shows that it makes a difference. I mean, I think the American people have lost a lot of faith in the institution on both Republican and Democratic leadership, and have thought it's not responsive to where we want to go and what we want to do. And I think this new Congress, needs to show relatively quickly that it learned some things from the election. That's going to be tougher on the budget, tougher on spending, probably take a little bit more conservative line on a lot of issues, but at the same time be responsive to the fact that we have a lot of people out there hurting in an economic recession. So they're expecting change and results in short order. But every new Congress, I know we sit down in our office, I know you do too, and sort of think through, okay, what are the things to our congressional district or our state that are really important, that are apt to come up in the next couple of years, and we try to think through where should we be, what should our priorities be. So as you look at the new Congress and you're thinking about it first obviously from the point of view of the second district, but also from the state, what do you see as the big issues that we ought to be focused on and try and make progress on?
Well, I think the economy, I mean, it's a national issue, but it's also a local issue. We've talked about different ways that we can expand the job base in eastern Oklahoma. We have several different industries that are very important, one being the timber industry in the southeastern part of our district. Companies like Weyerhaeuser, Plum Creek, and others play an important role. I serve on the Resources Committee, which deals a lot with federal lands and also a lot of timber issues. The McAllister Army Ammunition Depot, being on the Armed Services Committee, how can we expand the missions there? And that ties in with Lawton.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of things that we do in McAllister that end up helping Lawton and vice versa. So how can we build on what we've already done, and expand that? Also working with our tribes. My district has per capita one of the highest Native American populations in the country. And so those are some of the things that we've already kind of been working on since I've been in office, but we want to build on that. Now there's some other national issues and those sorts of things, but there's so many different issues out there. You can't do everything, and so you have to be focused, and that's what we've done. But there are a couple of national issues I think that do merit a look this year. I think campaign finance reform, something my dad worked on when he was in the Senate. We plan to maybe introduce some legislation directed at some of those reforms on a national scale. But of course, I tend to be, I was always told you're either an Oklahoma congressman or a congressman from Oklahoma. I tend to be an Oklahoma congressman. I think it's important to tend to the folks, and we're very constituent oriented, as I know you are. We do a lot of casework and help a lot of veterans, and that may not be as sexy to some people as it is to folks, but I really think it's important.
Yeah, well, you just find out how important it is if you don't do it.
That's right.
But one of the areas you've been a real national leader on, and where I actually think there may be an opportunity for some bipartisan cooperation, is the whole natural gas area. Obviously very important to all of Oklahoma economically, but a lot of people at home don't realize you co-chair a natural gas task force, and have really been at the cutting edge of a lot of the things we need to do as a country to exploit what's now our most probably abundant and certainly our cleanest fossil fuel. So what are some of the things you've got in mind there?
Well, we introduced legislation in the last Congress and this Congress, the Nat Gas Act, along with you as a co-sponsor, Democrats and Republicans. There's a Senate companion bill right now with Senator Menendez and Senator Hatch. So, polar opposites politically, but working in a bipartisan way to work on this legislation. Basically, what the bill does is it expands the use of natural gas. We've got a ton of natural gas with these new shale plays in Oklahoma, Louisiana, Texas, Pennsylvania, New York, all over the country. So we got this new supply. Basically, we expand the building of natural gas vehicles, uses, for instance, filling stations in your home, filling stations where you normally fill up with gasoline. any type of incentive that we can do to expand that market so that we can wean ourselves off of foreign oil. You and I have both been supporters of domestic energy, and this is just another way to promote that. Frankly, natural gas has been so abundant that the prices have gone down. It affects our state budget. It affects so many parts of our economy. And, you know, it's kind of hard not to be pro-natural gas when Boone Pickens was born in your district, Boone being from Holdenville. And this is a portion of the Pickens plan. We've in the tax package that's actually just worked its way through the Senate earlier this week, there was a provision of the Nat Gas Act in that bill. We don't have everything that we want, but maybe in the next Congress we can expand on that. Chrysler is talking about building some natural gas vehicles. There are countries across the globe that produce many more natural gas vehicles than we do right here in the United States, and we've got the supply. We don't want to export that gas. We want to use it here.
I couldn't agree more. And again, you know, the president's talked a little bit about this. So this is actually one of those areas that I think the two parties actually can get together on, hopefully make some serious progress. Let me ask you about another thing. You sit obviously on the Armed Services Committee, but a lot of people in Oklahoma don't realize you also sit on the Intelligence Committee, and that is a really big deal. I mean, you have to be appointed by the leader of your party. Not very many members do it. You literally deal with things that other members can't know about for security reasons. So we put a high degree of confidence in you and everybody else on that committee to make good decisions in the intelligence area and keep us out of trouble, so to speak. We've had a lot of interesting incidents, everything from the Transport Security Administration, Transportation Security Administration, upping the intensity of scrutiny going on airplanes. We've heard about that. We've had WikiLeaks. So, and I know you've followed very closely and supported very strongly the efforts of our troops in the war on terror all across the world. So if you're assessing the state of American security right now, we're all of us sort of looking at domestic stuff, but you've got to think with another hat on. How do you see things in terms of our own internal security? And then how do you assess where we're at in Afghanistan and Iraq?
Well, I'm frankly amazed that we have not had a large-scale domestic attack since 9/11. We've had some instances. We've broken up some plots in New York, and we remember the underwear bomber that came on an airliner. It's just a matter of time. I hate to say this, but it's a matter of time before they're successful. We've caught different groups plotting, sending packages to the United States, and we have a very good intelligence community. But all it takes is one instance when you're off. I mean, even if you're 99.9% secure, that little percentage that can cause real harm. I think with the TSA, I know a lot of people don't like to be fondled. They don't want to be, have to go through this screening, and it invades their personal space. But at the same time, I can tell you, without going into detail, these terrorists are looking at any type of way that they can bring an explosive device on an airplane. If it's not the airlines, it's going to be a train, it's going to be a large place, a mall, a football game. It's just a matter of time, and it's very scary. When we go into those meetings in the Intelligence Committee, there are 22 members of the committee, 13 Democrats, 9 Republicans. That will change with the change over in Congress. We get to listen to the director of the FBI, the CIA, all the different agency heads, and learn so much more about all of our capabilities, not only domestically but all across the world. And it's a scary place, and there are people that want to do us harm. And I think I've been very strong on this. I know you have, like on Guantanamo Bay. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why we have that place. These are not shoplifters. These are killers. These are bad people that want to do us harm, and we need to do everything we can to get that intelligence from them. Afghanistan and Iraq is in a much better place. I think December of 2011, they're talking about having most of all the troops out. We'll see whether or not security will prevail. I hope so. we still will have some kind of a training role there with their security forces. Afghanistan, I think, is a much longer slog. I think it's going to take some time. Obviously, we've had the surge as we did in Iraq, but Afghanistan is a very different place from Iraq. Afghanistan, most of the people are outside of the center of the country in Kabul. Most people are illiterate. I mean, this is a society that goes back, hundreds, if not thousands, of years in development compared to Iraq. So most people, it's hard to win the hearts and minds if they can't read.
Well, and tough to train an army.
That's
Something
right.
You don't think about it, but it's very tough to train a military when you're looking at 15 and 20% literacy rates.
That's right. And Pakistan, our role, the role of Pakistan, are they our friend? Are they our foe? How much are they helping us? Are they just helping us just enough? And there's still a lot of that region where we think Osama bin Laden is, or at least has been, this kind of lawless area. Why aren't we doing more? I wish we could be doing more. But I think Afghanistan is much more complex. And if you look through the history, as you're a historian, it's been very, very difficult. But I'm going to support the troops, as you have, support the funding, do everything we can to give them the necessary tools to succeed. But at the same time, I think we need to look at how we can be more efficient, more effective, having smaller strike teams. I think boots on the ground is important, but at the same time, we need to use every other tool that we have. And I saw that our special envoy Holbrooke has just passed away, and that's a tough thing for a lot of people in that region. He was actually making a lot of progress.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this has been, we live in a very divisive and contentious period in American politics. And certainly the Iraq War was very divisive and contentious. But it's interesting to me that this has actually been much more bipartisan exercise. The war in Iraq has really sort of wound down under the agreement and strategy, in my view, negotiated by the president, the so-called SOFA Accords and the Status of Forces Agreement. Obama's pretty much operated that. I think he's made some tough decisions, politically difficult for him, I know. I mean, he's tripled the number of troops in Afghanistan, put General Petraeus, who I think is our very best, in charge, and it's a very wise move, I think, on his part. He's had strong bipartisan support in Congress. I know you've been supportive. Republicans have generally been supportive. And so while the war hasn't been popular, and these things never are because it's a hard, tough mission, the fact that there really has been a relative absence of acrimony about it, that at least in a political sense, there's been a great deal of cooperation. I think it's something that's largely missed by the commentators. And I know for the president to have made the decisions he's made to this point, those were politically tough. I actually give him a lot of credit for that. I mean, it would have been easy for him to sort of say, well, this wasn't mine and I'm walking away from this or whatever. Instead, he took a long, tough look and took some measures I know surprised some people in his own party. So, hopefully we can, when it comes to American security, and I think we've actually made progress in the last 2-3 years in this regard, leave the partisan divisions at the water's edge and actually cooperate overseas. What? Let me ask you this. We're also struggling. You mentioned the economy, but you and I have a more immediate task here, which is going to be the budget deficit. There's no question. $1.3 trillion. It is way out of hand.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the messages of the electorate. They want us to deal with it. How do you rank that as one of the issues that is going to confront us over the next 2 or 3 years?
I think it's going to be very important. I've always been of the belief that when the economy was going sour in 2008, 2007, 2008, up to now, we had to do everything we could in the short term, whether that's different types of stimulus, whether that's spending tax cuts. Now we're talking about tax cuts, making sure that we didn't have our banking system collapse, those sorts of things. we had to do that. Now, going forward, these deficits are a real problem. Because, I mean, Moody's has even talked about downgrading, the country. I mean, all these sorts of things. I think it's important that what we do is we do this in a bipartisan way. The Deficit Commission, I think, is a good first step. We're going to have to make some decisions that are very unpopular. I think it's going to have to be done, instead of doing it piecemeal, doing it all at once. And it's just going to be difficult. But I think you have to take the politics out of it. Members of the House are up for election every 2 years. It's very difficult for a lot of people who are up for re-election to make these decisions. But almost like a BRAC commission, where you have to take that out, and then we'll have an up or down vote on it and move forward. But entitlements are the biggest portion of the budget, and no one wants their entitlements cut. So it's most people want all these services, all sorts of programs, but they want their taxes low. And at some point, we're going to have to make those tough calls. And I was glad to see the Republicans actually are going to be doing those spending cuts right off the bat.
We are. So no question on that. I think you and I will operate with a smaller budget next year. Not a big surprise. The Speaker announced it on 60 Minutes this week, so I guess we're not exactly breaking news here. And I think that'll spread through the committees and the leadership offices and some of the other institutions, because I think when you're going to ask people to make tough decisions, you have to start with yourself to have any kind of credibility at all. And I think we'd all agree Congress doesn't have the credibility we'd all like it to have. So we will do that. I will tell you, just sitting on the Appropriations Committee, I actually have a meeting later today with our incoming chairman, Hal Rogers from Kentucky, who's a great guy, and but he's very intent that we're going to have some serious cuts in discretionary spending to get our credibility back, so we can move on to these bigger issues. Because I think you are exactly right. At the end of the day, once we have cut what we can out of discretionary spending, we're going to have to move to two areas which I think are the real crux of the deficit problem. The first one's entitlement reform, and the second one is tax policy.
That's right.
And we unbalance the budget more in those two areas than we do in terms of what we spend. If you tell appropriators they can only spend a certain amount of money, that's what they'll do. They'll live within that means. And actually they'll come in under that if they possibly can. But entitlement programs, as we all know, are politically tough. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
A new health care bill.
New health care bill.
It was very unpopular.
Well, there'll be a major effort there. And that's one area where our delegation was extremely united in a bipartisan sense. You were, I know, under enormous pressure in your own party. It's always tough. I've been there in reverse before. And to tell your own president or the majority of your caucus, now I think are going in the wrong direction, and certainly the people I represent think we're going in the wrong direction. That's a tough thing to do. Unfortunately, I think you'll have more opportunities to be courageous going forward, because we will try and defund some of those things. And I think relatively early in the session, we'll have a vote on the repeal of Obamacare, if you will, if I can use that name, of the health care reform bill.
Sure.
And, I can't speak for your district, although I can't imagine it's much different than mine, since ours are bud. I mean, people that I represent very much want us to get serious about that.
It was a very unpopular piece of legislation. And it wasn't just the bill, it was the way that it was, the process. People feel like they were left out. There were these side deals. I mean, the Cornhusker kickback and all the Louisiana Purchase and all these other different things in the Senate, and then it came over to the House. People just felt like, golly, why are we doing this in the middle of a very tough economy? We're going to be spending a lot more money to save money. That didn't make much sense to people. I think the real question is going to be going forward, okay, if we repeal the legislation, what are we going to replace it with, or are we going to replace it? If you poll test certain pieces of the bill, like making sure that insurance companies cannot deny you based on pre-existing conditions, or dropping you because you get sick. I mean, those are some very popular pieces of the bill. Now, there are a lot of other parts. the taxes on small business, individual mandate, which was just ruled unconstitutional in one of the courts in Virginia I saw recently. There are lots of other pieces of this that are very unpopular, and so I've supported some market-driven reforms. I've supported association health plans in the past, some of these other type of reforms. So I'm open to looking at different ways that we can make, if it doesn't get repealed, because you still have a Democratic president, even if the vote was to repeal, it's most certainly either going to die in the Senate or be vetoed. What can we do to improve it in the short term? Because we're still, a lot of this doesn't kick in until 2014. Mm-hmm. So there's some time to defund parts, massage parts, at least slow down some of the bad. I'm going to be in support of my constituents. 68% of Oklahomans want to repeal the health care bill. And, it's just the same in my district. And even though it's overwhelmingly a Democratic district, they didn't support this.
Well, Oklahomans are overwhelmingly conservative, whatever their partisan affiliation is. And I agree. I mean, I've found very little difference along partisan lines in Oklahoma on this. It's very strong opposition. And I do think we'll see a little bit of everything, if you will. That is, we'll clearly have the major symbolic vote to repeal in the House, and I agree with your assessment. Probably won't get through the Senate, certainly won't get past the president. Then I think we will try and defund and slow down certain aspects. Mm-hmm. But then I hope we take some of these things, which we've actually passed in a bipartisan sense before, and you mentioned associated health care plans, tort reform, mm-hmm. Market-driven insurance where you can purchase across state lines. These are things actually that have often passed the House, never gotten through the Senate. Mm-hmm. The Senate, whether you're Democrat or Republican majority, you believe is absolutely the graveyard of all good ideas. Nothing gets through the Senate. So we're going to have that opportunity. We don't have a lot of time left here, but just in a very few seconds, we actually have a local initiative that you and I work on, and that's to defend the right of people who are guides for fishermen in Lake Texoma, and you've been a real leader in that, trying to make sure that we don't get what are really small businessmen caught up by a bureaucracy that demands too much in way of regulation and cost from them.
That's right. Well, I grew up part of my life on Lake Texoma. My grandparents had a house right there on Lake Texoma. And I didn't realize this, but it's a navigable water because it's between two states, so it's regulated by the Coast Guard. And I think not a lot of people knew that. And there was a tragic death on the lake, and then all of a sudden enforcement started happening via the Coast Guard on fishing guides. And when you think of the Coast Guard, you think of Coast Guard being out in the ocean. You don't think of it being on a lake. Well, anyway, they ticketed these folks who are really important to the fishing industry, and we've been working with your office to make sure we have the state regulated instead, making sure we have safety, but at the same time making sure that they have their livelihood. Well,
that's why we love to work with you, because you can talk all the way from international down to fishing on Lake Texoma. But Dan, it's been a pleasure to have you here.
Tom.
Thanks for your service in the Congress. Thanks for the wonderful job you do for our state, and thanks for the terrifically bipartisan manner in which you work with the entire delegation. Your credit to your family, and certainly a credit to Oklahoma.
Thank you, Tom.
You bet.
Yeah.